Welcome to First. I'm Shirley Min along with Nichelle Polston and Mark Eichman. Delaware's animal control program is under new management. First explores what this means for Delawareans and animal welfare overall.
Bringing strangers together to form groups of interest is the goal of meetups. Want to play a board game? Take a nature hike? This might be for you.
Or how about learning about history? What does the name Peter Spencer mean to you? He's a big part of Delaware history. Plus, we put the late Justice Antonin Scalia's legacy in some historical context. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
Delaware's Office of Animal Welfare kicked off 2016 with new statewide animal control duties, partnering with a new shelter to house the animals. The changes also mark a new beginning for the First State Animal Center and SPCA in Kent County, which had provided animal control in the state for about a decade. We hash out what this all means for Delawareans in this week's First Look. Athena is lucky to be alive. She's still pretty skinny and scraped up, but the pup's on the mend.
It was this tree.
Thanks to Good Samaritan Liz Baldwin.
I didn't know she was frozen. It was so cold.
Liz Baldwin was running in Rockford Park on a cold January day when she found Athena left by this tree.
I wasn't even sure if it was alive. Literally left on the side of the park road. It was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking.
After doing some digging, Baldwin's friend called the state's Office of Animal Welfare to help.
If someone calls us with a concern about animal cruelty or animal control, we send an officer out to enforce the law, to educate the public, or provide resources. We also pick up animals sometimes that are stray or lost, or we rescue animals that have been neglected or abused.
Little history here. State lawmakers established the Office of Animal Welfare in 2013 to consolidate pet programs and services under a statewide umbrella. Now, the state manages things like a low-cost spay and neuter program, education, and most recently, animal control. Hetty Brown's in charge and says she has about $4 million taxpayer dollars to work with.
I do think that just by consolidating services and taking advantage of economy to scale, we can look for cost savings. We can also look to bring in new revenue, like through dog licensing.
Westchester-based Brandywine Valley SPCA, formerly Chester County SPCA, is the state's new shelter partner. So state animal control officers will bring the animals to Brandywine Valley's new Delaware shelter in Newcastle, where they'll get lots of TLC.
We are taking in animals from the Office of Animal Welfare, the animals that have no homes and owners. And if the owner is not reclaiming the animal, we would attempt to place it out for adoption.
Brandywine Valley outbid Delaware SPCA, winning the 3-year, $6 million contract.
There was about a $3 million difference between the 3-year contract bid between the Delaware SPCA and the Brandywine Valley SPCA. So cost did play into the decision.
I think it's kind of sad that our Office of Animal Welfare did not lobby the shelters in Delaware to each take a piece of the pie. Now we have a fifth nonprofit coming into our state asking for funds to help the animals.
Kevin Usselton is the executive director of First State Animal Center and SPCA in Kent County. For a long time, his shelter handled animal control and sheltering statewide. And for a long time, he pushed for a state takeover.
Each contract was set up with the county, so they were individually set up. If it went to the state, it would be one contract, which would be easier to maintain.
Yet Usselton didn't even bid on the state's sheltering contract when the time came.
We were somewhat surprised that they didn't bid, but of course it's an open bid process and each organization has to decide if providing those services are right for that organization.
It's no secret that Usselton's relationship with Brown and her supporters is tumultuous. Usselton believes his organization is always made out to be the bad guy because it's the only no-kill shelter in the state.
They were demoralizing our organization to members of the community and to elected officials. And so we just decided that it's best to leave them alone.
And so after 10 years, First State is getting out of the dog napping business and into doggy daycare and boarding for cats and dogs.
We're still offering sheltering to unwanted animals. but those unwanted animals come to us by owners instead of picking them up as strays on the street.
Meanwhile, Usselton says he helped Brandywine Valley get its bearings here in Delaware, where Athena is recuperating. And in spite of their differences, all parties agree the welfare of Delaware's animals is what matters most. If you have concerns about strays or dangerous dogs, animal cruelty concerns, or think you may have been exposed to rabies, call the Office of Animal Welfare's 24-hour hotline at 302-255-4646. The office also launched a statewide lost and found pet registry online, complete with pictures, that can be found at animalservices.delaware.gov.
So just curious, do owners have to go all the way to Newcastle County to pick up their dogs?
No, and Brandywine Valley SPCA's main shelter in Newcastle, that is the main shelter for adoptions and rehabilitation, but BVSPCA does have satellite sites in Kent and Sussex counties, so animals will remain in the counties where they're picked up.
Tell me how Athena is doing.
Athena's doing well. She's not quite there health-wise to be put up for adoption, but you can visit her this weekend. Brandywine Valley SPCA's grand opening on South Street is this weekend.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Shirley. This story can be found at newsworks.org/Delaware, your online home for daily Delaware news.
Coming up on First, experience the peephole artistry of Heather Seipel. It'll give you a new way to view photography. And later, want to play a board game but don't have anyone to play with? Check out the meetups. First Person this week focuses on the legacy of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia and the looming battle shaping up to replace him. We've invited two people to help us sort through that. Professor Alan Garfield is from the Widener University Delaware Law School, and from the University of Delaware we have Dr. Eric Rise. He's the Associate Chairman of the Sociology and Justice Department. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Professor Garfield, let's start with you and the Scalia legacy. There's been a lot of praise for his ability to bring forward the notion of original intent. And is that really his legacy?
That is a big part of his legacy, that, you know, the whole question in interpreting the Constitution is, with constitutional law, is why can a small group of people overrule laws enacted by elected representatives? And because the Constitution's terms are so vague, and so Scalia said we're bound to interpret it by the original meaning of the Constitution, and that he pushed that, and in some ways that put liberals on the spot for things like same-sex marriage and gay rights, but of course there were lots of things like Citizens United and Bush versus Gore, which he voted in favor of and didn't seem to comport with original meaning.
Is one of those sort of his most notable opinion, or is there something else that you would say is sort of the defining Scalia opinion?
Well, the opinion everybody points to is the Second Amendment opinion about the right to bear, that there was a private right to bear arms, which was a decision where he really did focus on the original meaning. But just to show how history could be manipulated, he went and looked at all the books and all the histories. So did Justice Stevens, and guess what? The 5 conservative justices read history to say there's a private right to bear arms. The 4 conservatives said history says there isn't. So.
All right, so Dr. Rise, now we have this sort of kind of an epic showdown in Congress between the White House, and there's lots of the Republican candidates saying now's the time to wait before we do a nomination and approval for a new justice. What's the precedent behind kind of that idea?
Well, I think one of the things that I find strange about that is that if you look at what the Constitution says, it really wants to keep the selection of the justices and judges, federal judges in general, out of the hands of the people. The branch of government that is most close to the people, the House of Representatives, is completely left out of the process. It's left to the President and to the Senate. And so to say that the people should have their say really doesn't comport with, ironically, the original intent of the founders.
So now we have Senator Coons, who is on the committee that will be sort of considering whatever the nominee is. Does he have an opportunity to build some consensus, or do you sort of foresee this as being kind of a shouting match that we've seen over the last really 8 years, the way Congress has kind of acted?
Yeah, I would be very surprised to see anybody build some sort of consensus on this. I think what's interesting to watch is how this will play out. Will the will the Republicans in the Senate really hold to not even considering a nomination, or will they allow the president to make a nomination, consider it, and then most likely vote it down? I don't think that Senator Coons, or to be fair to him, anybody is going to be able to really breach the, or repair this breach that's existed since at least 2014, but probably since President Obama was elected.
We haven't really seen consensus on pretty much any other issue.
Absolutely.
This will not be the issue that breaks
Absolutely.
it. So, Professor, the other, I guess, replacing a Supreme Court justice is a relatively rare thing, doesn't happen all that often, and now there's, looking ahead to the future, there's the potential that whoever is in the White House next year could have another opportunity to replace with Ruth Bader Ginsburg possibly leaving the court. Thoughts on the way this plays out in light of maybe that possibility?
Well, this just goes to show how important it is for people to participate in the election, because who is going to become the next president could make major changes that could affect the Supreme Court for years to go. I mean, right now you've got a court where there's 5 reliably conservative justices and 4 reliably liberal justices, with Kennedy sometimes swinging to the left on things like same-sex marriage. So if you take one of the conservative judges like Scalia and you replace them with another Ruth Bader Ginsburg, it can have tremendous consequences for things like Citizens United decisions, same-sex marriage decision, voter ID laws, regulation of extreme, partisan gerrymandering, church and state issues. So there's a lot at stake, and that's why, I agree, it's going to be very likely to find a consensus candidate, because people know how much is at stake in this appointment.
And obviously, the nomination of a Supreme Court justice always seems to be a political hot potato, just because of its rarity, or because of the process, the way it's designed to replace that person.
Well, I think part of it is that the Supreme Court nominations or Supreme Court appointments are part of a president's longest living legacy. The justices serve for life, and therefore it's a way to have an impact on the government and on the nation even after you've left office. And so it's high stakes for the president, and then certainly at least since the Bork nomination in 1987, the process itself has been highly politicized as well.
Yeah, and mind you, if it was a conservative justice leaving and there was a Republican president, so you're replacing one conservative with another, it wouldn't be such a difficult issue. And especially with the power of the court potentially shifting, it just, makes for very tense battle.
And then finally, one kind of case or one issue where Scalia's vote kind of swayed things one way or the other, and now that is sort of up for question as to what the future of a similar case might be, come to mind?
Well, in some ways, oddly, he wasn't writing lots of majority decisions because he tended to like to do his things the own way. He wasn't a great coalition builder, but his votes were critical on same-sex marriage. His vote was critical on Citizens United. His vote was critical on church and state issues, and you could go on and on down the list. So this is a very important, decision as to who he's going to replace.
Right, and I think in terms of cases that are currently on the docket, 2 things that will clearly be affected by his absence and will probably allow to stand decisions that he would likely have voted to overturn would be in terms of the rights of public unions, which is a case coming out of California, as well as a case involving voting rights and whether or not, and how to apportion voting rights.
It'll be fascinating to watch, and I'm sure you both will be eagerly watching the developments. We can't wait to see how it all plays out. Professor Alan Garfield of the Widener University Delaware Law School, and Dr. Eric Rise, Associate Chairman of the Sociology and Justice Department at the University of Delaware. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here on First.
Did you just tune into the middle of that interview? Go to WHYY.org/first to view it when you want. Past shows are there as well. Check out our e-newsletter if you want to find out what WHYY is doing in Delaware.
Heather Seipel's been taking pictures since she was old enough to hold a camera. Lately, Heather's been experimenting with a door peephole mounted to her camera lens. She points it towards nature, turning trees, flowers, and old buildings into fantastical, mythical-looking worlds. First experience when hiking with Heather to get a peek into that world.
My name is Heather Seipel. I am a third-generation photographer. My father and grandfather were both photographers. When I got my first camera, it was a little thing with a slide viewer on one side and just a viewfinder on the other, so I could look at the pictures of the animals inside, or I could look on the other side, and I never looked at the sides of the animals. I always looked through the viewfinder and just pretended to capture everything in front of me. Lately, I've been doing more where I'm trying to instill a sense of fantasy, especially when I go out and find some ruins. It reminds me of things that I've read as a story, fairy tales and things like that. What I call them are my orbs. I've taken a peephole for a door and mounted it into a lens cap. What I got was this circular, distorted, it looks almost three-dimensional. So I started doing landscapes with it, and I'm like, ooh. And after that, I was just hooked. When I go out and do a landscape, I try to pick out one little detail here or there that really you'd otherwise walk over, like a flower on the ground or a piece of a leaf sitting on a rock or something like that, and really focus on it. Or I'll try to infuse some kind of fantasy theme to it. Just exploring, and you get the sense of innocence and the sense of fantasy and wonder. I've got one where we were out at another park. We found this old plastic rocking horse, and I parked my daughter down in the windowsill with a rocking horse and took a picture of her. And I looked at the negative later on, and there's this monstrous face in the plaster. It's like a goblin or something trying to get her. It's just really wild. It's got this fairy tale kind of feel to it. When you do black and white, it takes away that sense of instant reality, and it emphasizes the moods, the shadows, the shapes. I like going out and finding new places. I like going out and exploring old places and seeing how they've changed because the lighting has changed. I like watching the image come up in the developer. Slowly, this image just fades into view. It's still magical. I've been doing this for so many decades. I've been doing this since I was in elementary school, and it still doesn't get old. And I like watching people and seeing how they get absorbed in what they're looking at. It's just, the whole thing is just, it's magical. Well, nobody's ever accused me of doing anything the normal way. I like being able to use the medium as something other than face value. I really like being able to take my photographs and suggest stories to people that they can really think about and fill in the blanks, and kind of take my artwork as a place to take off in their own imaginations. I like people looking at things and going, wow, I never thought of it that way. I never saw it that way before.
In case you were wondering what far-off world we ventured to for our story, it was First State National Monument off of Beaver Valley Road near the Delaware and PA border. You can see an exhibit of Heather's work at ColorWorks in Wilmington coming up in May. And you can find more information on Heather's work on our website, seipelart.com.
We've had a lot packed into our show this week. Maybe you need a break, but you can't find anyone to share your interests. This next story may offer help. There are lots of activities happening in Delaware, and finding out about them is just a click away. It's the latest way that social media is helping people meet up. Social media has changed the way we communicate and how we socialize. The days of meeting at the malt shop or the mall have made way to meetups.
I was introduced to the website Meetup pretty recently because I was looking for some social things to do in my free time, and board games is one of my hobbies, so this interested me, so I thought I'd come out tonight.
Meetup is a social media online platform that allows like-minded people to form social groups known as meetups.
We got started after I formed a book club through Meetup, and my mom had been mentioning that she was kind of bored and wanted to do something, and I said, start a board game group through Meetup. So we did.
Jenny and Lorraine Maslow are the leaders of the Upper Delaware Board Games Meetup group. They meet every 2 weeks at the Golden Dove Diner in Newcastle.
We usually have an average of 20 people per meetup, which is great.
Meetups reportedly have become popular among moms, outdoor enthusiasts, and business professionals. But a meetup category can be as diverse as you like. Delaware features varied groups such as single boomers, aspiring writers and authors, and people who enjoy playing board games.
It started off slow, but it blossomed very quickly, and I was really happy to see that because I know there's other people out there who like board games.
This one here is called Citadel. The theme of this game is we're building our own little cities. You build all kinds of different locations, and you can't have more than one location in your city.
It's not all about games at this meetup gathering. New friendships and relationships have also spawned.
I met my husband here. We ended up playing games and just fell in love.
I put an ad on Craigslist looking for friends after my best friend died and my other girlfriend, she got a divorce. And Lorraine actually answered my personal, and she's like, I don't have time to be your best friend, but I run this meetup group where we play games. You should totally come. So I've been coming all this. It was great. It was like the best thing that ever happened.
Jenny says without Meetup, bringing a group like this together wouldn't have been easy.
Before social media, it would have been pretty difficult to connect this many people with the same interests in as quick a time as we have been able to do it.
Across town is where Gary Zinker's Wilmington Writers Group meets monthly.
People come from all around the area, and their goal is to become better writers.
The Wilmington Group is Gary's second successful meetup group. He says the meetup system handles all the details.
It lets me manage the assets of the group. It lets me bill members for their memberships or for their monthly dues. Meetup also lets me post files. The second thing is, Meetup is great because it's actually a social media. So what happens is that people join Meetup looking for opportunities to join groups. So my group gets found, just like everyone else's group.
Another key element Gary says Meetup offers is it allows him to focus on managing the meeting and offering services of value to keep members coming back, and it seems to be working.
I think all of it is very good. I appreciate the input of the other writers. There are many very, very skilled writers in this, and I enjoy discussing the craft of writing.
Gary Zinker also runs the Mainline Writers Group outside of Philadelphia. They're now in their 7th year and they've published a book. Zinker hopes to do the same thing with the Wilmington Group. If you want to join a meetup, go to meetup.com and search for your interests in Delaware.
Last week, we reported on Governor Jack Markell signing the Apology for Slavery in Delaware. If you want to see the perspective of cartoonist Rob Torno, check out his work on newsworks.org/Delaware. Another piece of African-American history in Delaware can be found in the work of Peter Spencer. Who was Spencer? Besides the name of a plaza in Wilmington? Take a look. Wilmington's Mother African Union Church traces its history all the way back to the early 1800s when it was founded by Peter Spencer.
He was the first civil rights leader in the nation.
Reverend Dr. Lawrence Livingston, who now leads the church, says Spencer's message was both religious and political.
When he started the church, he also started based on the First Amendment, which gives a freedom of religion and the freedom of speech, and also the right to peaceable assembly.
At a time when 5 or more blacks could not gather without supervision, Peter Spencer, a freed slave, broke the law, establishing America's first incorporated African-American church in Wilmington.
It's one of the best unknown pieces of history.
His church led massive gatherings of African Americans starting in 1814 at an event called the August Quarterly.
And I just can't get my mind around how in the 1800s, he also convinced slave holders, people that held men and women captive, to allow some of them to go free for the weekend to come to Wilmington.
And go free they would. The spiritual celebration had another highly secret purpose.
People would come to Wilmington and plan future escapes.
Escapes pulled off with the help of another hometown hero, Quaker Thomas Garrett.
Thomas Garrett was one of the preeminent conductor, station master, you pick the term you want to use on the Underground Railroad.
He's like hooking up with Harriet Tubman and getting people the heck out of there. They're part of why in the Underground Railroad, Wilmington was called Freedom Land. And when he died, they carried him up the hill to the Quaker cemetery on their shoulders. It's the kind of stuff you go, man, our history is like cool like movies.
Peter Spencer is buried at the site of his church, now Wilmington's Peter Spencer Plaza. His legacy is also on display at the church's new location.
Well, the Peter Spencer Hallway is kind of our effort to chronicle the history of African Americans here in the nation.
The hallway documents Peter Spencer's contributions to the civil rights movement long before slavery was abolished.
When we go back 200 years, Peter Spencer was at the center of building this kind of community and religious or spiritual solidarity. It's not a coincidence, I think, that the churches were in the center of that.
In addition to starting Wilmington's Mother African Union Church, Peter Spencer went on to establish 31 churches and several schools. He died in 1843 at the age of 61, but his legacy lives on, not only in the church, but in the August Quarterly Festival, which still draws big crowds to Wilmington every summer.
Next week on First, we'll go on a journey to Flint, Michigan through the eyes of some Delaware residents who are committed to helping those suffering as a result of the water crisis there. Plus, we look at lifelong learning inside the halls of Osher Institute at the Wilmington campus of the University of Delaware. It's our Teach Me segment.
And that is First for this week. We thank you for watching. For Nichelle Polston and Mark Eichman, I'm Shirley Min. Have a great week.
He's only a companion.